Hey guys, it's Miss Vosk. I'm here today to go through one of the FTX hearings that we've had this week. I'm specifically going to focus on the House Financial Services Committee hearing that was on December 13th. It's a 3.5 hour long hearing, so I've watched the whole thing. I'm going to break it down for you and give you some key takeaways that I think you should know.
The pride of crypto is to get regulated.
They use QuickBooks, a multi-billion-dollar company using QuickBooks.
QuickBooks?
Not sophisticated at all. No independent board. That's highly unusual in a size company.
This is a simple case in my mind of where did the money go?
Before I jump into it, I want to talk about a couple background points about the hearing and kind of what went down the day before the hearing. SBF was arrested the night before in the Bahamas, and he was supposed to testify at this hearing, but he was arrested the night before and was unable to attend. Although his written testimony was leaked by Forbes prior. So they had the written testimony. They didn't walk through the whole thing because it had some language they were not comfortable sharing, but they did submit it for evidence. One of the representatives actually mentioned the written testimony and said it was disrespectful and he can't even read it to his children. It's public if you do want to read it, so I'll link out to that below. So in the hearing, House of Representative members are questioning the new FTX CEO, John Ray III. Many of the questions were repeats about how this was worse than Enron, the lack of record keeping at FTX, and they request many numbers that John Ray just doesn't have yet. However, there were some key takeaways and some pretty funny and embarrassing moments by some of the House of Representative members that I'm going to go over. This hearing is important because it tells us how the US is intending to handle cases like this related to cryptocurrency moving forward and what regulations could potentially come of this hearing. It also tells us who is supportive of crypto and blockchain and who is still clueless about how crypto works and the future of it. It's kind of crazy what some of these representative members are saying and just proves to you that they are clueless, yet they are going to have a say in what kind of regulations are put forward. So this hearing is also run by two House members, the chairman. So they have Representative Maxine Waters, who has been seen close to SBF, including there's videos of her blowing kisses to him as he leaves the room. She got some heat on Twitter about SBF not being subpoenaed to attend this, and she downright just shut down those rumors. She tweeted and said that lies are circulating, that she's not willing to subpoena SBF, and he has been requested to testify at the hearing. Again, this is before he was arrested, and she said a subpoena is on the table, so stay tuned. Later on, SBF comes in and says he's not ready to testify because he doesn't have enough information. Representative Maxine Waters then responds and says, well, based on your role as CEO and all of your interviews that you've had the past couple weeks, it's clear to us you have enough information, so please testify. Then he got arrested. So the hearing opens up with Maxine Waters and her co-chairperson, Mr. McHenry, and he is also a crypto champion here. SBF is facing 8 charges, specifically from the Southern District of New York. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud on customers, conspiracy to commit wire fraud on lenders, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, conspiracies to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States and violate the campaign finance laws. And that's related to those backdoor donations that SBF had to the Democratic Party and supposedly some ones that were not reported to the Republican Party. She also opens the hearing by applauding the SEC for submitting 2 counts against SBF as well for fraud in the offer or sale of securities and fraud in connection with the purchase or sale of securities. And then there are 2 additional charges from the CFTC, that's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which include fraud and fraudulent misstatements omissions. So I want to go through some of the footage from the opening from Mr. McHenry because I think he does a really good job of opening the whole hearing. He sets the scene and basically says that this is old school fraud with new school technology. This is not something bad against the crypto industry. This is one bad actor or actors that have done something wrong. We're not here to talk about crypto and crypto being a bad tool or bad platform or industry. We're here to talk about SBF and FTX and what happened. So let's take a look at that.
All right, let's face it. There's an old saying, there's nothing new under the sun. And it's safe to assume that fraud and fraudsters have been around just as long as that phrase has been around. Bankman-Fried's play is nothing new. We've seen it before. It appears to be the same old school fraud, just using new technology. We have to separate out the bad actions of an individual from the good created by an industry and an innovation.
So Mr. McHenry goes on to talk about Gary Gensler and how they plan to communicate with him early and often, and that there has been a failure to enforce regulations there. So just a little bit of background on Mr. McHenry. He has proposed a bill called Keep Innovation in America Act. The bill basically kind of establishes that digital assets are here to stay, and it just kind of goes through some of the reporting structures around cryptocurrency. So next we hear from John Ray III, who is the new CEO at FTX. He goes through an overview of why he thinks FTX collapsed and then breaks it down into 4 different silos. So we have the FTX US silo, those are US customers, FTX.com silo, those are international customers, the Alameda Trading Group, and then just general investments that FTX has made.
The FTX Group's collapse appears to stem from absolute concentration of control in the hands of a small group of grossly inexperienced and unsophisticated individuals who failed to implement virtually any of the systems or controls that are necessary for a company entrusted with other people's money or assets. Some of the unacceptable management practices we've identified so far include the use of computer infrastructure that gave individuals in senior management access to systems that stored customer assets without security controls to prevent them from redirecting those assets. Storing of certain private keys to access hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto assets without effective security controls or encryption. The ability of Alameda to borrow funds held at FTX.com, the commingling of assets, the lack of complete documentation for transactions involving nearly 500 separate investments made with FTX Group funds and assets, in the absence of audited or reliable financial statements.
So Mr. John Ray goes on to explain his background. When he was introduced to FTX, he knows that customer assets at FTX.com were commingled with the Alameda trading platform. They know that Alameda used those funds for margin trading. The FTX group went on a spending binge from 2021 to 2022. So this is not just something that just happened. It's been in effect for well over a year, and $5 billion were spent in that. So next we have questions starting from the House of Representatives. I'm not going to go through all of them because there are a ton, and I'm not going to touch on their political backgrounds. I just want to go through some of these and see kind of what crypto advocates we have and which ones we should be questioning because they are still clueless about how crypto and blockchain work.
The loans that were given to Mr. Bankman-Fried were not just one loan, it was numerous loans, some of which were documented by individual promissory notes. There's no description of what the purpose of the loan was. In one instance, he signed both as the issuer of the loan as well as the recipient of the loan.
That's crazy. So Mr. McHenry then has his questioning for 5 minutes.
When approximately did FTX begin to experience financial trouble?
Well, it was first disclosed to the public beginning around November 2nd. When this began was months, if not, earlier years. Our investigation is continuing. But this is not something that happened overnight or in the context of a week.
So he is confident that this is not something that happened overnight. This is not because of a tweet from Binance. Next, there's questioning about FTX and Alameda and how they are separate entities and if they run separately or if they are commingled. So here's John Ray's answer to that.
You've seen no distinction in governance between the two?
Oh, absolutely not. There's no distinction whatsoever. The owners of the company could really run free reign across all 4 silos.
Thank you for testimony.
So there's proof that there are, across all 4 silos that we talked about, there's commingling, there's chaos, there's no record keeping. So John Ray also worked on the Enron case, which was another huge fraud case. John Ray has been quoted saying that this case with FTX has actually been worse than Enron. And so here we have some representatives asking questions about how is it really worse than Enron?
Every case is different. The challenges of every case is different. The issue here that I was speaking to is I've just never seen an utter lack of record keeping. Absolutely no internal controls whatsoever. And of course, this case is then made difficult in that context when you're dealing with technology.
He talks about how they've been able to secure $1 billion of assets so far in the last month since taking over FTX. They have been quoted saying there's anywhere between $7 to $10 billion that are missing, but they're working on recovering funds in multiple ways, finding wallets every day with different funds in it, and they've been able to secure $1 billion so far. There's a lot of questioning after this about what John Ray's experience can kind of give us in terms of direction to creating regulation, and he definitely steers away from these questions. He doesn't want to talk about creating regulation. He wants to talk about FTX, and I think that's important. We're not here to talk about how to fix crypto. We're here to talk about how to fix FTX, what happened, and to make the customers whole again as much as we can.
This one is unusual, and it's unusual in the sense that literally, there's no record keeping whatsoever. It's in the absence of record keeping. Employees would communicate, invoicing and expenses on Slack. They use QuickBooks, a multi-billion-dollar company using QuickBooks. QuickBooks. Nothing against QuickBooks, very nice tool, just not for a multi-billion-dollar company.
It just goes to show you just how little record keeping and how I don't know if there's just nothing going on at FTX, and I don't know how this wasn't caught. Okay, so next we hear from the wonderful Mr. Sherman. So this guy, you just have to listen to him.
For 5 years, I've been trying to ban American investments in crypto. I'm the only member of the House to get an F from the only crypto promoting organization that rates members of Congress. My fear is that we'll view Sam Bankman-Fried as just one big snake in a crypto Garden of Eden. The fact is, crypto is a garden of snakes. Now, from the outside, crypto just looks like a non-fungible token, an electronic pet rock for the 21st century, something that might be good to invest in even though it has no apparent value because you might get somebody else to buy it from you for even more. But in reality, the hope of crypto is to be a currency. It puts the advantage right in the name. Crypto, hidden currency. Well, there are drug dealers, human traffickers, sanctions evaders who will find that to be a good feature. And as Sam Bankman-Fried would tell you, there's a hell of a market for bankruptcy court evasion. But the big market is tax evasion. Now, Sam Bankman-Fried, or should I say inmate 14372,
That part was
had
funny.
one purpose in all of his efforts here in Congress. His one purpose was to keep the SEC out of crypto, to provide a patina of regulation, baby regulation from the CFTC. And I'll have one comment from my colleagues. Don't trash Sam Bankman-Fried and then pass his bill.
So I'm not going to touch on Sam Bankman-Fried's bill. That's not the point of this video. There are millions of people using crypto. Are we all billionaire bros? Are we all terrorists and drug dealers all avoiding tax evasion? Because I haven't done any of those things. I pay my taxes on my crypto, and I'm sure a lot of Americans do, and that's all they care about. I can't take this guy seriously. But next, we have Mr. Ray, who is questioned about some of the assets that FTX has. And so there are a couple things that are still fully solvent. We've heard Japan is fully solvent, or I should say the Japan branch of FTX. They also talk about LedgerX, who is, he claims is fully solvent, and they plan to sell it. So the next kind of segment I want to pull is from Mr. Green from Texas.
That he was doing the best that he could to be a servant and great service to humankind. But I would also mention this, he did attend Canada USA Math Camp, a summer program for mathematically talented high school students. He also has a degree from MIT, 2014, bachelor's degree in physics with a minor in mathematics. Is all of this just one big mistake that was made by this gentleman, sir, as you see it, based upon what you've seen so far? It looks to me like there may be some malfeasance here.
So John Ray goes on to say he's not going to make any judgments about SBF. He's only going to use what he has and what information he has through FTX. They just go on and say basically this can't be a mistake. This is more than conscientious stupidity. So next, there's some questioning about SEC's history with FTX. John Ray, again, doesn't have that much information about that yet, but will be investigating it further. This next one is when we bring up SBF's written testimony. You'll see the reaction here in a minute.
He says, and I quote, "I would like to start out by formally stating under oath," and I can't even say it publicly. The next two words, absolutely insulting. This is Congress of the United States. And I'd like to submit this, Madam Chair, for the record.
So basically, SBF, he opens up his testimony by saying, I f***ed up. So he can't say it, I'm going to say it. That's just how he opens it. You don't open a statement like that to the U.S. House of Representatives. What are you thinking? This is also the famous House of Representatives member who thinks we should rename cryptocurrency.
I'm going to discuss this with my colleagues. I think it's an appropriate name. I just wanted to know whether you would support changing it to Creepy Dough.
I'll leave that skill set to the committee.
And I have to say, John Ray does an exceptional job answering the questions he is asked and just being professional through this whole thing. There are House of Representative members that are trying to trash crypto in this entire hearing, and he's just been completely respectful, and I think he's doing a really good job in this hearing. And so we have another member who apparently has history with bankruptcy. He doesn't understand cryptocurrency, and it's very clear.
Do you know when the Madoff bankruptcy was filed?
Probably circa 2008, I guess. I don't know.
Say 2008. And do you know they just made a distribution out of that bankruptcy last week?
That's what I understand, yes.
So that's, 14 years? How
Yes.
old are you? Because I want you to add 100 to whatever your age is when you finally untangle all of this. Your job, I think, as the bankruptcy trustee or conservator or whatever you are, is to go gather as many assets as you can, and that could be from some very innocent people, to then spread it out equally among who you think the real creditors are, or, I mean, is that sort of a fair statement?
It's a general statement, but it's not far off.
Well, because we on this committee, and a number of us had to deal with the Madoff stuff, you know, one of the things you're going to face is some guy say, I'm more innocent than that guy. You're going to be dealing with so many preferences, so many fraudulent transfers. Do you know how much was in tokens? So let's say I have Dogecoin, or I don't even know how you say it, but I have 10 Dogecoin. Is it Dogecoin or Dogecoin? Dogecoin.
Doge.
All right, I have 10 Dogecoins. A year ago, 10 Dogecoins, for sake of argument, was worth $1,000, so $100 a coin. I put that in there, but Dogecoin today is worth, like, I don't know what, say not nearly that much. I mean, how are you going to evaluate that as to what I should get out of the bankruptcy?
That's the point of crypto. Stocks work very similarly. You buy one, there's one of it. In some bankruptcy cases, they take the valuation of the day of the bankruptcy. That's the value. And you can pay back. One Doge equals one Doge, no matter what. Even if it was a year ago and it's $1,000 and it's today, it's $1, it's one Doge. This next representative asks about SBF's parents' involvement in this and how he has paid them.
So I hear that you haven't discovered that. I mean, it would seem interesting that they didn't either give legal advice or business advice or parental advice, maybe.
Well, certainly, clearly, and I think in our first day papers, we indicated that Mr. Bankman had given legal advice.
Okay, and had he been an employee of FTX, as has been reported?
You know, I don't know if he actually had an employee status, but he certainly received payments from, the family did receive payments.
Okay, that sounds like employment to me. It seems to me that there's a lot more to uncover here. Certainly, Mr. Bankman-Fried has wooed many in New York, Silicon Valley, around the world, and yes, certainly here in DC, feeling better about themselves, all while making them gobs of money.
Sounds like SBF to me. So next we go on to talk about FTX. There were some reports, I guess, that FTX was supposed to be more secure or more safe than ExxonMobil. So next we have Mr. Vargas from California.
I really don't get the point of blockchain and cryptocurrency. It's like keeping track of how many times you chew gum, like who cares?
Okay, Mr. Vargas, well, you definitely wore the right tie to the hearing today because you look like a clown. Blockchain is one of the most innovative technologies, and yes, it is way by far kind of just an advanced piece of technology. It's hard to understand, it's hard to explain, but it is way more advanced than you trying to keep track of how many times you've chewed gum. You clearly do not understand it. He also says that he doesn't get the point unless you're a terrorist or you're hiding money. There's clearly so much work that our representatives have to do to understand this technology before that they are making regulations about it. So we hear from another crypto champion. He also wants everyone to know that this is not a fail of the industry. This is the fail of one person.
And I want to remind my colleagues that Mr. McHenry talked about bond ripoffs in the railroad expansion in the 1870s and 1880s. True. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac leading us down the primrose path in the early 2000s on housing ownership in the secondary market, and there were frauds. But that didn't mean that we didn't want to invest in railroads in the United States for the history of the country. And it didn't mean that we don't need a vigorous single-family housing market and secondary market in our country. So let's not confuse the malfeasance and disgusting activity of FTX with the fact that we need a proper, thoughtful regulatory oversight of digital assets.
Now this next one, if you watch only one of these, you have to watch this guy because he is a crypto champion. He is awesome. He does a great job explaining why this is important and why some of the House members need to learn and understand how crypto works. And also Gary Gensler has some questions that he needs to answer.
Mr. Ray, I know you're handicapped with the information you currently have obtained, but Chair Gensler refuses to answer our questions or testify before this committee. Will you commit to sharing with this committee any internal documents you come across regarding communication between FTX and Mr. Gensler or others at the SEC?
We'll fully cooperate, with the committee and the regulatory authorities with respect to our investigation.
Again, specifically, I just want copies that this committee will want copies of those communications to the extent they exist.
We can certainly work with your staff to get you what you need.
And Mr. Ray, I appreciate you mentioning your concerns in the beginning of my questioning about the concentration of power in a small group of individuals with no oversight. That is the exact problem that open and permissionless technology like crypto and blockchain solve. It solves for the problems of centralization. Fortunately, the immutable characteristics of public blockchains that some people would care not to understand in this committee allowed the crypto community to reveal Sam Bankman-Fried's fraud, and the on-chain public record will assist law enforcement moving forward. I encourage my colleagues to understand Sam Bankman-Fried's con for what it is: a failure of centralization, a failure of business ethics, and a crime. It is not a failure of technology.
So this is Representative Tom Emmer. He goes on, he starts his questioning with just simple questions. Was there any legal team? Was there a compliance team? Was there a team overlooking risk management? And he answers them and he says, do you think that should have been there? And he says, yes, it should have been there. And that's the key thing here. This is not a crypto problem. This is an SBF and FTX problem. Tom Emmer, just as a background, also recently tweeted, he said, it's probably a good time to re-up my bipartisan Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. Basically, it asserts that blockchain entities that never have custody of consumer funds are not money transmitters, providing necessary legal certainty to ensure the future of crypto reflects American values. This is the guy that we want. We want somebody who understands crypto, who can give us regulations where there needs to be regulations and give us regulation and remove regulations where there doesn't need to be. We need someone like him who understands how crypto works and will stand up for us in hearings like this. So moving more into the hearing, there's talk of FTT tokens, there's talk of, are there wallets that we don't know about? He basically says that FTX International is definitely going to be more affected by this than US, but they're still going through wallets, so they don't have final numbers. So here's what John Ray has to say, kind of where we are right now with FTX US and where we are with FTX International.
Where are the assets? How we locate those assets? It's a mining exercise at this point. At the end of the day, we're not going to be able to recover all the losses here. Right? Money was spent that we'll never get back. There will be losses on the international side. We're hopeful on the U.S. side.
So it kind of acknowledges that is definitely going to be different treatments of international versus U.S., and that's important, especially because this is a U.S. hearing. So obviously everyone in this room is concerned about their constituents within their state. There's more talk about how essentially Alameda was a customer on FTX.com. When customer funds were sent directly, they were kind of deposited into that account. If FTX.com was in the US, would we have the same outcome here? Ray says, I don't think it matters wherever FTX.com was, this still would have happened. And so they're just kind of probing to kind of understand, is this a US problem or is this an FTX problem? How are we going to regulate this? Because if we don't have proper regulations, people are just going to keep going offshore. There's also questions of, why is FTX US in the Bahamas and not in the US? Is there something we need to investigate there? They also talk more about commingling of funds. So this next part is important because there was a lot of action the day after and the day before FTX filed their Chapter 11 proceedings.
You have stated unauthorized access to certain assets occurred and that the company was in touch with law enforcement officials and regulators. Have you determined whether, in fact, assets were moved out after the bankruptcy?
Yes, clearly there was assets moved out after the bankruptcy.
And do you know whether or not that was an actual hack, or was this done, as has been reported, at the direction of the Bahamian authorities?
It was both.
And so some was done. Some was done as a result of a hack. Some was done as a result of the request of the Bahamian authorities.
Yes, that's right.
And do you have indication as to why the Bahamian authorities made that request?
Well, it wasn't a request. They just took it.
The Bahamian authorities took the funds that were at FTX
Yes.
through their own action. Was no action required by FTX employees? Maybe you could provide just a little color.
They were aided by the ex-employee.
So basically, John Ray confirms here that those withdrawals after the Chapter 11 proceedings were both a hack and both related to the Bahamian authorities. And so we've heard from SBF, I believe he posted somewhere, that basically he didn't want to live in a place with angry people. So yeah, he opened up withdrawals for, I believe it was 25 and a half hours, and over $100 million were withdrawn to Bahamian citizens. So that is another thing that's going on. They're investigating and following the withdrawals related to the hack, which is separate from the Bahamian authorities as well. So next, I won't run through this whole section. It's pretty quick. It goes through a lot of details, but AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she asks questions and kind of digs deep into the whole timeline of the withdrawals from the Bahamian authorities, SBF's letter to unfreeze that went to the authorities, how much was withdrawn. Then she asks this question that hasn't been asked yet, which I think is important. Why did they arrest him the day before he was supposed to be heard in trial? Apparently there's some influence from the Department of Justice and SDNY, which is the Southern District of New York, who initiated that. Wouldn't it have been helpful to hear from SBF? Why would we wait to arrest, why would we arrest him right before we're about to hear from him? Wouldn't him being on the chair be useful here? Mr. Timmons has similar views as well. Basically, he wants to get down to the bottom of what role did the Department of Justice have, who issued the arrest for SBF prior to the hearing. He is a former prosecutor, and he says it just doesn't make sense. We should have heard from him today. And then we hear from a couple other representatives. Again, a lot of the same questions here. Next, we hear from this guy. He's another one who doesn't believe in crypto, thinks it's useless. All these companies are doing are selling hype. And so there is one last representative I want to hear from, who he has an agnostic approach to kind of crypto and technology and money transfers.
And I maintain this market and tech agnostic position. I think it's the appropriate one. We need strong and clear regulations here from Washington. But I do want to say that my patience with the crypto bulls is wearing thin. It's been 14 years and the American public has heard lots of promises, but it has seen lots of Ponzi schemes. For crypto, it's time to put up or shut up. It's worth noting that ARK, the innovation investor, several years ago identified 5 general purpose technologies of the future: DNA sequencing, artificial intelligence, robotics, energy storage, and blockchain. And yet those first 4 disruptive technologies have already delivered game-changing innovation that affects my constituents in daily life. Blockchain has thus far delivered white papers and podcasts about Bitcoin and DAOs and NFTs, DeFi, and more. And it's all interesting, it's exciting even, but none of it has achieved product market fit at scale. And it's time for the blockchain investors and entrepreneurs to build things that matter or to lose more credibility.
So he makes some good points, but I think a lot of this also has to do with media. A lot of Ponzi schemes are put in the media. There's not a lot of talk of or coverage of when blockchain and crypto do have successes. And there are so many repeat projects. I can't tell you how many projects approach us who are the first DeFi, NFT, play to earn game. The industry kind of needs to come together and just work on advancing it and making more real use cases for blockchain, and also developing things that can help the average user, including the government, more use cases. So we broke down the FTX hearing today. It was a 3.5-hour long hearing with Mr. John Ray III from FTX, who's the new CEO there. He does a great job yielding all these questions and answering them. He does a great job just kind of only addressing the important things and not some of the dumb things that some of these representatives have said. He doesn't have a lot of information. They're still uncovering numbers every single day. Overall, the key takeaways are that we have those 4 silos: FTX.com, FTX US, Alameda, and the other investments that SBF and his team made. There's a lot of missing money. There's a lot that they're trying to uncover. This is going to take months to kind of dig through and kind of even just come up with a resolution for all this. There's a lot of intermingling with other companies as well, but I think it was good to get this information out kind of formally in this hearing setting. Also, if you want some Bitcoin merch, thank you to Bitcoin Universe who sent us an awesome merch package. Again, this is an FTX hearing with the House. This is not the Senate hearing. If you want to hear Kevin O'Leary make a fool of himself, we can maybe do another video on that. We also have another FTX bankruptcy hearing coming up. So if you want another breakdown like this, thought this was helpful, let me know in the comments below. Thanks again for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. See you on the next one.